Welcome to this presentation about creating the optimal agile product team. And my name is Mattias Björnheden, and I've held a bunch of different titles at different tech companies: engineering manager, director of engineering, VP of engineering, and in those roles been involved in recruiting for, staffing, reorganizing something like 30 to 35 agile product teams. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of that and try to make a couple of points. And teams are a nice concept. It's easy to get like abstract about it in different settings, but in the end, teams are made up of people. So let's walk through a little bit about how we usually talk about teams. So this is sort of my VP of engineering version about talking about teams. You're in the engineering leadership team. You're talking in org charts or budget spreadsheets and so on. It's about headcount. You may have some traffic light staffing idea where green is well staffed and the red struggling a bit and so on. Still, it's boxes. It's in worst case, you even talk about resources and so on. But nice PowerPoint slides format. Then I go talk to my PMs and developers, and you often end up in discussion about who owns what. How do you have autonomous teams that can own stuff? Team topologies like situations as you have with this presentation, stream-aligned teams, platforms, complicated subsystems teams, and here you've even abstracted away the headcount and individual numbers and so on. It's a very theoretical teams concept. Moving on to talking to my agile coaches and leaders, then you often end up with something like this. Finally have some individual representations of people, still abstract, often nice and hand-drawn and so on. And you may even talk about roles. So some people have an individual title, and developers, they're just a bunch of some developers somewhere in worst case. And all of these representations are good and have some kind of purpose, and they're very, very useful to sort of figuring out what kind of teams that you need. But what I really want to get to in this talk is sort of this next slide, that when you go and meet your actual teams, and these are all teams I've worked with in some forms, they're made up of real people, individuals with their own resumes and families and issues and skills and stuff. So the assumption for this conversation is that you've done all the work, you've been to the conferences, you read so many books, you've listened to talk, so you're acing the theoretical side of putting together a really, really good team. And I want to talk about the parts that cover the people in the team. So, when you know what kind of teams you need for your organization, how do you make sure you find people that will love to be on that team and will work really well in that situation? So, starting with the people themselves. There's a bunch of places you can find people to do work in your organization. The most obvious one is the people you already have on your team. Then the next one, which should also be obvious, but sometimes people forget about, is that you can move people from one team to another. So you have people who may want to be on the new team or that you believe will help out really well on this other team. You can bring in consultants, you can do hiring, you can maybe do some advanced collaborative joint venture with this nice startup on the US West Coast and try to get that to work. But these four are sort of the main ones I work with in my career. So why do we care about the people? Going back to my sort of engineering leadership group example, where you had the struggling platform team, you had the performance marketing team that's well staffed, and you say, okay, let's move a backend developer with some infrastructure skills from performance marketing into platform. How about Lisa? And it could end there. But if you know who Lisa is, you know she's sort of fast learner, she's really good at real-time event-driven systems, and she's fairly happy in performance marketing and really doesn't like to get into all like the nitty-gritty details about the architectural documents. So once we figured out the architecture, she's the one I would trust to get that built in no time according to specification. So maybe she doesn't want to move to platform. But you also know that we have Ali in the performance marketing team, who's more quality focused. He really likes to write architectural documents. He's good at APIs, good mentor, very good at explaining to other teams and so on. So maybe the solution is this. You go talk to Ali and Lisa, and you're like, Ali would be super happy to move to platform, and Lisa is very happy where she's at. So this gets us to my first point of this presentation, which is get to know the people you work with in your organization in order to get the right people on the right team. And if you're somewhat confused about how do you get to know the people you work with, there's a couple of ways. The more introverted way is to sort of read up about them, talk to others about them, check their CVs and LinkedIn profile. If you weren't involved in hiring them, I'm surprised often how many people who don't know the history of their colleagues. They may have some amazing skills that you weren't aware of until you read that, oh, they did this thing at this other company. And the other, and highly recommended option, regardless of your own personality, talk to them, ask them, what do they care about? What something they do in their current team that they find boring? What's something that they're great at and would like to do, but don't get to do enough of? What would they like to learn? What are people they really enjoy working with? And so on. So first point, get to know the people you're working with. Then back to another nice theoretical example about teams. So once again, you know exactly what kind of teams you need. You figured this out. You've done all the theory, and you know that what will really propel your organization forward is moving from these two stream-aligned teams to two slightly different stream-aligned team and the platform team. You've also talked to all the people. You know them well, so you know that they should move in this direction. And once again, caveat, check in with them. Don't present like this is the new teams. Like, this is the suggestion for new teams. Do you have anything we should adjust or correct in this situation? And then you move here. And now we get to my second point, or like the other way to staff your teams, which is you're also moving to these teams because you're doing fairly well as an organization and you want to deliver more stuff. So now you need to hire 3 people into these 2 teams. And how do you do that? And this sort of point to recruit, like you actually learn something about recruiting. It's a very well-researched area. There was a great talk about this last year at Agile Sverige. And first thing about this, like hire for what the team needs to add, not for who's already there. The example I often use is I once had this team where you had 3 people who were really good at Linux bash scripting, and then there was sort of, okay, how about this candidate? They say, oh, they're also really good at Linux bash scripting. And I say, like, no, we probably shouldn't hire that person because we have 3 people already who's great at this thing. But what you need is someone who's really good at talking to stakeholders and explaining what we're doing and how sort of our great scripts make sure our infrastructure is always working and so on. So make sure you hire for what you really want to add to the team and not cloning the people that are already there. Work with people who knows a lot about recruiting. It's your responsibility as sort of hiring manager and so on to learn from HR and other great people in your organization to bring in the right people for the team. So we moved people around, we've figured out the reorg, everyone has their first name because we know them really well. We've hired some great people, and now, do we have the optimal product team? Probably not. You will get into the office and it will look something like this. Half the team is over in this corner, one person is sitting by themselves, someone is at home and hasn't shown for days. They don't know what the priorities are and where they're going, because even if you put together the best people with the right mix of skills, you still need to do the work to coach them and help them become that great product team. So maybe in 6 to 12 months, you will have the optimal Agile product team. But starting with people who would love to be on that team usually helps. Thank you. And this is my 4 points.